They say seniors need family for comfort, but what if the 5 things that replace family lead to a darkness far more terrifying? Will he survive what waits on the other side? The old man sat in his quiet room. The ticking clock on the wall grew louder with each passing second. Outside, the world carried on with no thought of him. He had expected his children to visit, but the chair across from him remained empty. The silence pressed against his chest like a weight. A sudden chill slipped in through the cracked window. The curtain fluttered, brushing against the old photographs on the wall. His eyes caught the picture of his family smiling. It was taken years ago, before they began to drift away. A sharp ache pulsed in his chest, not of illness, but of loneliness. He whispered to himself, almost in anger, "There must be more than waiting for someone who never comes." His voice echoed back in the empty room, hollow and weak. The shadows stretched across the floor as evening fell. He rose slowly, his joints protesting with every movement. In that moment, he realized 5 things that might give him life again. Not family, not waiting. Something different. The first was companionship beyond blood. He remembered the laughter from a group of men he once played cards with at the park. Their voices, rough and full of stories, carried warmth he had long forgotten. The second was purpose. His eyes fell on a dusty notebook at the corner of the shelf. He once loved to write about places he had never been. The pen still rested inside, untouched for years. The third was movement. His cane leaned against the wall as if daring him to walk further than the doorstep. The fourth was learning. A small radio in the corner hummed with voices of strangers sharing stories. Each word felt like a spark, lighting a curiosity deep inside him. The fifth was silence, but a chosen silence. The silence of peace, not abandonment. The silence found in a quiet garden or in the gentle rhythm of breathing at dawn. Yet as he thought of these 5, a sound startled him. The floorboard creaked, slow, deliberate, like footsteps moving across the hall. His heart tightened. The clock ticked harder, pounding in his ears. No one was supposed to be there. The air grew heavier, as though the room itself was holding its breath. He turned his head slowly toward the sound. The chair that had always been empty now seemed different. The shadows gathered thick around it, darker than the rest of the room. His knees weakened, but he forced himself to stand. A sudden knock echoed from the door. Sharp, cold, unfamiliar. The sound rattled through the house, making the pictures tremble on the walls. The old man froze, his hand hovering above the cane. The knock came again, louder this time, as if demanding entry. He felt the weight of all 5 truths pressing down on him, as though they had been revealed for this very moment. The air turned colder. His breath rose like mist, and the silence that once comforted him now screamed with dread. The old man's hand trembled against the cane. The second knock thundered through the wooden frame, echoing down the narrow hall. He swallowed hard, the dryness in his throat scraping like sandpaper. The silence after the knock was worse than the sound itself. It stretched, heavy and suffocating, as though the entire house leaned in to listen. His eyes darted to the window. Outside, the street lamp flickered, throwing shadows that twisted unnaturally across the garden. The leaves rustled, yet there was no wind. His ears strained for another noise, any clue of what waited beyond the door. But the world had gone still. He remembered the first truth: companionship. The thought struck him with cruel irony. He longed for the presence of another human being, yet now that presence lurked outside in a form unknown. His grip tightened on the cane until his knuckles whitened. The third knock came, slow and deliberate, like a warning. He felt his legs weaken beneath him. The clock on the wall ticked louder, pounding in rhythm with his heart. Tick, knock, tick, knock. The old man forced himself to breathe deeply. The second truth whispered in his mind: purpose. Was this his purpose now? To face the thing that came when no family remained? The shadows in the corners of the room thickened. The chair across from him looked no longer empty. A figure seemed to stir in its darkness, shifting like smoke, yet shaped like something more. His pulse hammered in his ears. The cane felt useless in his grasp, nothing more than a fragile stick against the unknown. The knock turned into scratching, long, deliberate drags of something sharp across the wooden surface. The sound cut into the silence, curling deep into his bones. He took a shaky step toward the door, though every part of him screamed to stay away. The floorboards groaned beneath his weight. With each step, the scratching grew louder, hungrier. By the time he reached the hallway, the door shook with the force of the scratching, as if the wood itself begged to give way. He stopped, inches away, his breath fogged in the cold air seeping through the cracks. The fourth truth echoed, learning. What was he supposed to learn in this moment? That even in old age, fear was sharper than any knife. That abandonment was nothing compared to the terror of the unknown waiting outside. His hand hovered above the doorknob, the metal glistened in the dim light, wet as if touched by something damp and alive. A whisper curled through the crack, soft yet distinct. It spoke his name. The sound was not a voice he recognized. It carried the weight of many voices blended into one, heavy with sorrow and hunger. He stumbled back, nearly dropping the cane. The whisper stretched into a low moan, vibrating through the door and into his chest. The fifth truth returned to him. Silence. But this silence was gone. This silence was stolen. He turned, desperate to retreat to the safety of his room. Yet when he looked down the hallway, the photographs on the wall had changed. The smiling faces of his children were gone. In their place, the frames held dark, blank spaces, as if the memories themselves had been erased. He gasped, clutching his chest. The air grew colder still, biting against his skin. The scratching stopped. The knock did not return. Instead, the door slowly creaked open by itself. The hinges screamed like something in pain. The old man froze, eyes locked on the widening gap. Beyond the door was no street, no garden, no night sky. There was only darkness, a depth so absolute it felt alive. It pulsed, as if breathing. The whispering voices swelled again, calling his name in unison. He stumbled back, but the cane slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. The sound rang sharp, swallowed instantly by the blackness spilling from the doorway. The shadows stretched across the floor, snaking toward him with unnatural speed. His legs refused to move. The weight of the five truths bore down on him, cruel and mocking. Companionship had come, but not in the form he wished. Purpose had arrived, but it was not his own. Movement was now impossible. Learning had brought him only terror. And silence. Silence was lost forever. The blackness reached his feet. It climbed, cold and thick like tar, wrapping around his legs. He cried out, the sound torn from his throat and swallowed instantly by the void. The chair across the room scraped against the floor. The figure within it began to rise. It had no face, yet he felt its eyes burrow into his soul. Its shape was human, but its edges dissolved into smoke that coiled and writhed. It lifted an arm, long and thin, fingers stretched unnaturally wide. The whisper became a roar, shaking the walls, rattling the pictures, tearing the air itself apart. His chest heaved, searching for breath, but the blackness pressed tighter. The walls of the house bent inward, the ceiling groaning as if about to collapse. He reached out blindly, desperate for something to hold, something real. His hand brushed against the old notebook on the shelf, the one that had once held his dreams of distant places. The pages fluttered open by themselves, though no wind stirred. Words appeared across the paper in jagged black ink. They spelled his name again and again, each stroke darker, more violent. His scream filled the room, though no one outside would ever hear it. The blackness surged, pulling him toward the open door, toward the endless dark. The last thing he saw was the chair. Empty again, waiting. The old man's scream faded into silence. The room steadied, the walls straightening, the ceiling no longer groaning. The photographs on the wall returned, the smiling faces of his children glowing faintly in the dim light. The cane lay quietly on the floor, still and harmless once more. The notebook closed itself with a gentle thud, as though keeping its secrets locked away. The door swung shut without a sound, sealing the night beyond. The old man stood trembling, his breath ragged but alive. His heart still pounded, but slowly it began to settle. The five truths returned to him, not as torment, but as a lifeline. Companionship, he would seek it where he could, not wait for it to knock in the night. Purpose, he would write again, filling the notebook with stories only he could tell. Movement, each step he took, no matter how small, would be proof of life. Learning, every word, every sound, every new thought would remind him that he was not finished. And silence, the silence he chose, not the silence of dread, but the silence of peace. The shadows retreated, settling back into corners where they belonged. The air grew warmer, gentler, wrapping him in calm. He closed his eyes, a faint smile pressing against his lips. The night was no longer something to fear. It was simply another beginning.